All right, good evening. The day has arrived. We're at the last iPoli-Sci workshop of the term. I want to thank those of you who are listening in. I appreciate you taking the time. This workshop on global conflict and cooperation is a new one that I started, and I'm really excited to be wrapping it up for this term, and I believe I'll be extending it into the next term. And this focuses on defining, exploring, and discussing global conflict and cooperation from different points of view, such as international institutions, country governments, and non-governmental organizations. So for week 8, we're going to talk about bilateralism, and we're going to bring it all back home with our neighbor to the south, Mexico. So our learning objectives with this workshop are the following. First is to define bilateral relations. Secondly is to explain operationalizations of the bilateral relation between the United States and Mexico. And then lastly is to describe why bilateral relations can be cooperative and conflictual simultaneously. So what are bilateral relations? Well, bilateralism is the conduct of political, economic, or cultural relations between two sovereign states or countries. This is in contrast to unilateralism and multilateralism, which is activity by either a single country or jointly by multiple countries, respectively. Now, when states recognize one another as sovereign states and agree to diplomatic relations, they create a bilateral relationship. And states with bilateral ties will exchange diplomatic agents, such as ambassadors, to facilitate dialogue and cooperation between each other's countries. But just because the goal is cooperation doesn't mean that there isn't conflict at some times. So I wanted to share this resource because it's something that I thought was really interesting. The United States State Department, which is the foreign policy arm of the diplomatic foreign policy arm of the United States, maintains a database and fact sheets for bilateral relations with countries around the world. I'm going to go ahead and open that so you can see what this looks like. So here's their website, and you can look at the bilateral relation fact sheets for any country. So for example, go ahead and check out Angola. And give this a moment to load. And here it talks about the relations between the two countries, any U.S. assistance that may be provided to the country, bilateral economic relations, the country, Angola's membership in international organizations, and then additional information like who the principal officers are, the embassy, and then all these additional links out to help folks understand what the relationship is between two countries. So I thought this resource was really great. I included it in the presentation, so you can check it out if you want to explore it for other countries that you're interested in. For tonight's workshop, we'll focus in on the relationship between the United States and Mexico. Now, this is a special one because my grandparents were born and raised and lived in Mexico. I myself was born in Mexico, and I came to the States when I was an infant. And my mom's side is mostly in Mexico, my dad's side is mostly here in the United States. So for most of my life, I've had this dual sense of identity, one being Mexican, one being American. And so it's nice to be able to talk about it here, because I think when you think about bilateral relations, we always talk about countries, but you can also think about it at a personal level, especially for those of you who have connections with other countries in the world, either personally or through your family or through your extended family or through generations ago, those relationships. And I think it gives a greater sense of meaning and purpose when we talk about these relations, because it isn't just two governments talking to each other. It's actually peoples, communities, and families kind of seeing the connections between themselves across borders. So what I'd like to highlight first are the most important by now, bilateral relations, soccer. Let's go ahead and check out the extended highlights from the recent US-Mexico Gold Cup final, which was quite exciting to say the least. So let me go ahead and open this, and we'll let this play for the full amount of time. I'll go ahead and mute myself. To be precise, and apparently over 350 million documented crossings annually every year. So this shared land border creates a strong relationship, not just with respect to security, but also with economics, because a lot of people will live on one side of the border and work on the other, and then they'll go back through. A lot of trade between the two countries, which we'll talk about in a moment, and just the need to work closely together. So this always reminds me of what I learned in my high school history classes, like, good neighbors make good friends. And sometimes good friends can not be the best of friends. So it just depends on how you want to develop and work that relationship through, especially not only on the cooperative front, but on the conflictual fronts as well. One thing I wanted to share, which I think most people aren't familiar with, is that there's a commission that's focused on the international boundary and water between the United States and Mexico. And I was excited to be able to share this with you, because I think most of the times people think, oh, it's two governments kind of working together. But that's definitely the case, but also the two governments can work together to essentially create a mechanism by which they will work more closely together. So for example, I'll go ahead and have this read to us. And so you hear there that there's actually someone who's dedicated to this relationship and to working through all the treaties and other legal and judicial agreements that would exist between the two countries with respect to the border and to the waters of the region. And so if you're interested in learning more, you can check out their website, ibwc.gov. Next up, what I'd like to share is the trade and the economy. The United States, Mexico, and Canada entered into a new trade agreement. So this isn't strictly bilateral, but I think it's useful to point out. And they just celebrated their first anniversary of that agreement. And I wanted to go ahead and pull up where's that? This part right here, this 1-year anniversary. So I'll go ahead and play this. And so you'll notice here that there's an Office of the United States Trade Representative, and this person is nominated by the President and approved by the Senate, and they serve as the President's representative to different trade agreements with different countries around the world. And so you heard there that there's different elements of the plan, and what's really fascinating, in addition to just the overall contours of the plan, is like if you wanted to, right, you can read the full text of the agreement here. Now, obviously, there's some complexity to all this, and there's people who go to, they basically spend their entire careers focused on these different aspects of trade, but you'd be surprised just how complex these relationships are. So for example, you'll see here the table of contents of the UCMA protocol, things like the preamble, which gives like this is what our goals are with this agreement, and initial provisions and general definitions. And then you'll see they go into tremendous detail about agriculture, rules of origin, textiles and apparel, sanitation and phytosanitary measures, telecommunications, digital trade. Almost everything you can think of is talked about. This is why these agreements take so long to get worked through by the different governments that are involved, and then eventually to be brought forward, in this case, United States, into the Congress for debate, consideration, and approval. So a lot of complexity to all trade agreements. It's not as simple as this side and that side, even though it gets distilled that way in the general media. But for the professionals and for the interest groups and others who are really attuned to these trade agreements, they spend a great amount of time trying to work through the different differences of opinion, differences of interest, and then try to reach an agreement. And this is the document that represents that. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just 1 second. Get this reset here. All right, so on to the next one is education. And what I'd like to do is highlight the University of California's UC in Mexico program. I'm going to open this link. And we have a short video that I'll be playing. And this is a message from the new UC president, Dr. Michael Drake.
Hello, UC. I'm Michael Drake, the president of the University of California. This is a happy homecoming for me. I'm thrilled to be back. I was chancellor of the University of California, Irvine for 9 years, and prior to that, I led UC's Health Affairs enterprise and spent 3 decades as a professor and associate dean at UCSF. And at the very beginning, I was a medical student at UCSF. I'm proud of my UC roots and deeply honored now to lead the university known worldwide for its excellence, accessibility, and leadership on so many critical issues. From helping first-generation college students attain their degrees, to fighting climate change, to leading the way in the fight against COVID-19, the University of California continues to live up to its mission of teaching, research, and public service. This is a challenging period for the world, for our nation, and for all of us at UC. And working with you, I will do everything I can to support the university community through the times ahead. While our nation works to contain the COVID-19 pandemic, physical distancing protocols mean that we will work to find creative ways to connect with you over the coming months. I look forward to listening and learning about the opportunities and issues we face, and to collaborating with all of you as we move the university forward. As we navigate these extraordinary times, we must strive to be our best selves and hold on to our most important values. I will continue to keep an open line of communication with the UC community, and I look forward to our work together. I want to thank our students, faculty, and staff for everything you've done in recent months to stay on course and keep us operating as smoothly as possible. I can't wait to get started and to work with all of you to move our great university forward. Stay strong, stay well, and fiat lux.
And so that was a message from the new UC president, Chancellor Drake. And one thing in his role as representative of the university system is to maintain those connections that the UC has established around the world. And here you see this dialogue between the rectors or the leaders of different institutions. In this case, UC with President Drake and then Dr. Enriquez Grau-Wechers of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And it's just fascinating to see how education leaders are able to build those bridges. And it's not just the administrators or faculty talking to each other, it's actually having exchanges of students from both universities to live those experiences. And I've had at least one former student who participated in the UC Mexico program, and she just loved the experience at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And she really cherished the opportunity to be able to go back to the home country of her parents and to see how the relations can be improved at that level. Now, the last part I'd like to highlight is legal security. Obviously, I think this attracts a lot of attention in the media, but I think it's useful to also point out that there are conversations between the governments on these topics and on these issues. And one thing that came to my attention over the past week was the country of Mexico suing U.S. gun makers, arguing that millions of American guns have illegally flowed across the border and into the country of Mexico. And so let's go ahead and see if this website link opens up, and we'll have it read a few sentences to us. Start from here. Okay.
Mexico sued several U.S.-based gun companies Wednesday, arguing that their business practices led to illicit guns flowing over the border from the U.S. into Mexico, which in turn led to increased homicide rates. The lawsuit, which the government of Mexico filed in a federal court in Massachusetts, accused the companies of actively facilitating the unlawful trafficking of their guns to drug cartels and other criminals in Mexico. The companies targeted include Smith & Wesson, Beretta, Century Arms, Colt, Glock, Ruger, and Barrett, all gun makers, as well as a wholesaler in Boston called Interstate Arms. The companies did not respond to insiders' request for comment or could not be reached. The U.S. government, which Mexico has long criticized for its lax gun control laws, was not targeted by the lawsuit. The lawsuit said 70% to 90% of all guns recovered at crime scenes in Mexico, which has strict gun control laws, were trafficked from the U.S., adding that this flood is not a natural phenomenon or an inevitable consequence of the gun business or of U.S. gun laws.
And so the article goes on to describe why the country of Mexico is suing in a U.S. federal court businesses within the country of the United States. And it's just fascinating to see this happen, because when I read, I was like, that's unique for a country to use our federal court system to engage in this beginning legal dispute. And so this is just an example where, you know, the relationships between countries can be complex, and obviously on things as let's say lighthearted as soccer, to things more serious like security, to things in the middle like how do you maintain relations on water and border boundaries, on trade, the economy, and on education. So all in all, the big question is, like, how does this relate to political science? Well, political science is interested in the relationships between countries. And when you're able to look at multilateral agreements, which are relationships between multiple countries at the same time, you start to see the complexity or the web of it all. But if you really wanted to isolate looking at the relationship between one country and the other, you look at the bilateral relationship. And what's nice for us is that the United States has two very significant land borders with other countries, Canada in the north and Mexico in the south. And it really facilitates this conversation between them, both in the sense of cooperating on issues, but at the same time having some conflict. So you saw the range of cooperation here and of conflict. Like when it comes to soccer, obviously it's a competitive match and both countries and their representatives are having at it. When you look at education, it's probably about the exchange of knowledge and of people to have experiences in each other's countries, to things like arms and security control. So all in all, what's really fascinating about this bilateral relationship is so close to home here for us in California and at our college. And it just means a lot to be able to better understand the complexity of that relationship and being able to contribute to the ongoing dialogue on the range of issues that exist out there. So with that, we'll go ahead and stop the recording. And I want to thank you for taking the time to watch. So take care.